Mosaic, a daily news program from Worldlink TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East. Welcome. A Turkish governmental source said that the United States informed Turkey that the Iraqi Kurdish forces withdrew from the oil-rich city of Kirkuk, and that they will also withdraw from al-Mosul. The Kurdish troops had entered Kirkuk yesterday, an issue which concerned Turkey, who suspects that the Iraqi Kurds want to claim the city as the capital for their independent state. Furthermore, Kurdish forces entered al-Mosul after the withdrawal of Iraqi forces. Glimpses of the collapse of the local authority was apparent in al-Mosul, since some people engaged in looting and stealing in the absence of police, drowning the city in a state of chaos. Meanwhile, the al-Bashmarga Kurdish fighters left downtown al-Mosul before midday after controlling it for some time. A small number of Kurdish fighters had entered the city, and an hour later, the Bashmarga left the governmental square. Afterwards, some people raised the Iraqi flag on a government building, and the yellow flag of the Democratic Party of Kurdistan disappeared. Fire broke out in a number of government institutions in Baghdad after they were looted. The fires led to a number of explosions because some of the buildings contained weapons. Baghdad continues to be looted by outlaws in an unprecedented outbreak of looting and stealing. The U.S. forces, after turning the presidential complex into a command post in Baghdad, tried to control the deteriorated security conditions. They took several measures restricting movement and traffic. However, the situation remains the same, with unprecedented chaos.
General Vincent Brooks from
the Central Operations Command in Qatar said during his daily news conference that the United States released a list containing 55 names of wanted Iraqi officials, dead or alive, adding that they are trying to flee Iraq to other countries. He reiterated that the U.S. forces have control over the highway leading to Syria. Brooks added that the U.S. forces found 5 light planes headed north of Tikrit. He believes that the Iraqis were planning to use them to flee the country.
Today, the U.S. Army declared that the 5th Iraqi Military Division has completely surrendered in al-Mosul in northern Iraq. Captain Frank Thorpe from the Operations Command Center in Qatar said that the commander of the 5th Iraqi Military Division ordered the soldiers on the battlefield to surrender in al-Mosul. The U.S. forces have not yet decided on whether to consider the Iraqi soldiers prisoners of war or allow them to return to their homes. Furthermore, the spokesman for the U.S. Central Command in Qatar announced today that the oil-rich cities of Kirkuk and al-Mosul in northern Iraq have fallen.
Nanawa, al-Mosul, the third largest Iraqi city, fell without a fight, indicating a total collapse of the Iraqi regime in the north. The Kurdish fighters entered al-Mosul without resistance, amidst reports that the remaining Iraqi army abandoned their weapons and withdrew from Kirkuk. However, the action was preceded by an official ceasefire agreement signed by the commander of the 5th Iraqi Military Division and the U.S. forces stationed near al-Mosul. Meanwhile, security checkpoints were set up and citizens are now being searched. The general atmosphere of the city may be described as ceremonious and festive. Happy Iraqis are chanting anti-Saddam Hussein slogans. Nevertheless, anxiety and chaos continue to overrule the city. People are calling for an end to the sabotage and the looting of the government institutions and citizens' homes.
The theft and looting operations are being conducted under the yellow flag. We do not know if this flag represents al-Barazani, al-Talabani, or their opposition. From the early morning, all we could see is the yellow flag. The Kurds are looting hospitals, the municipality building, and banks. the good and honorable people of Al-Mosul did not steal anything.
البعض الآخر تنفس السعداء ووفته الجرأة
Others were relieved, gathered their courage, and talked about their suppressed anger and frustration of the past years. The Iraqi regime in Baghdad fell, but the military situation in the north remains dangerous.
نهاية اللعبة عسكريا محفوفة بالمخاطر في شمال البلاد.
One day after the U.S. forces entered Baghdad, and with the continued absence of authority, looting is still ongoing. Governmental buildings and the German embassy in Baghdad were looted today, and the homes of several top Iraqi officials were looted too.
The presence of the Iraqi Authority has not yet disappeared from Baghdad, despite the happiness and celebrations of victory that filled the Al Fardouz Plaza in downtown Baghdad, pulling down anything that reminds them of Saddam Hussein. It seems like the U.S. and British military plans to control Baghdad have not yet succeeded. The official U.S. military spokesman for the Central Command in Qatar admitted that there still remains pockets of Iraqi resistance in Baghdad and all of Iraq. Five civilians were killed and 6 others wounded as a result of the clashes between Iraqi fighters and U.S. soldiers near Al-Azamiya Mosque in the area of the presidential complex. Furthermore, U.S. forces face fierce resistance on the north shore of the Tigris River. U.S. military sources reported that a U.S. soldier had been killed and 3 others wounded.
Despite the celebrations in various Iraqi cities, military operations continue. There are still pockets of resistance in the large suburbs of Baghdad. We are dealing with them. However, there are still unstable areas in this vast country.
The day after the collapse of the Iraqi regime, Baghdad continues to be looted. Thousands of Iraqis are looting stores, commercial centers, and government buildings, stealing furniture, equipment, and air conditioners, amongst other things. The lootings also reached the homes of Iraqi Deputy Prime Minister Tariq Aziz and Saddam Hussein's daughter, Alia, in addition to looting a number of the officers' family homes on the eastern shore of the Tigris River. Diplomatic immunity did not spare the German embassy from the looting. It was completely emptied out from all its contents. This is all taking place in front of the eyes of what remains of Saddam Hussein's statue, also in front of the eyes of the U.S. forces, who are patrolling the Al Fardouz Plaza. The center celebrated the fall of the massive Saddam Hussein statue. Meanwhile, U.S. forces doubled their checkpoints in downtown Baghdad, where residents have to be searched everywhere they go. This is how the wounded city of Baghdad appears to be, complying to the rules of war. However, these rules may not be very just in anticipation of Saddam Hussein's reaction. Nevertheless, his fate is still unknown. After 2 days under siege, the Abu Dhabi crew managed to leave their office, which was caught in the crossfire. The area was surrounded by tens of tanks and stationed on bridges, preventing civilians from entering the distressed areas. However, they allowed people to cross the bridge going to the area of Al-Rasafa.
We live in Al-Tara, on the other side of Al-Rasafa. It's been 10 days now. Today, I want to go to the market. I came up to this side, then they made us go back.
Did you try crossing now, or are they still preventing you?
No, the people there did not say anything, but the ones looking from above said we had to go back. They said we can't cross to the other side, so we went back.
So you can't cross?
No, we can't.
How long has it been for you?
Today, it will be 15 days in Baghdad, in Al-Diwania specifically. Today, Omar insisted that we go back, but the Americans stopped us and said we can't cross, neither from this side nor the other. What is this? They came to liberate us, so what kind of liberation is this? This is oppression, not liberation. It is not just. We are civilized people. For 13 or 14 days, we couldn't buy anything for the house. The situation is really bad. I urge the Arab nation to figure out a solution.
The general public is afraid because they have been hearing gunshots here and there. In addition to that, the U.S. soldiers can't even speak Arabic.
When will this end? I mean, look at this destruction. Then what will happen? America will continue to occupy us? Will the Arabs permit this to happen to Iraq? Where are the Arabs? Are we going to be another Palestine? Is it possible, another Palestine?
The Al Jumaria Bridge and the Ministry of Planning are under full control of the U.S. tanks. A fierce battle took place at the Al Salam Palace after it was bombed by missiles. Meanwhile, bodies remain scattered around the palace. Abu Dhabi TV cameras entered the palace's medical complex. This may have been Iraq's president's private suite, or it may have been dedicated to Iraq's senior officials. Saddam's palaces fell, his statue collapsed, and the question is, where is Saddam? Amr al-Munri, Abu Dhabi Television, the Presidential Complex, Baghdad.
Throughout the day, there were continued reactions to the fall of Baghdad and the collapse of its regime. Arabs are emphasizing the importance of Iraqi self-determination.
White House spokesman Ari Fleischer stated that the U.S. President George Bush is pleased to see the Iraqis expressing their desire to be free and indicated that the war is not over yet. He said that the fate of Saddam Hussein is still unknown and that he missed the opportunity to peacefully travel abroad. However, American Vice President Dick Cheney warned that the U.S. and British forces may face difficult battles in Baghdad, despite indications that the regime has collapsed. He said that the forces that support the Iraqi president still control a number of cities in northern Iraq. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Tony Blair expressed his satisfaction with the reaction of the Iraqi people as he watched the fall of Baghdad on television. In Egypt, President Hosni Mubarak demanded that the Iraqis govern their own country and considered it the fastest possible way to achieve freedom and stability for the Iraqi people. In Saudi Arabia, Foreign Minister Saud al-Faisal said that his country will acknowledge any government chosen by the Iraqi people and emphasize the importance of facilitating the process of forming it. Meanwhile, the Jordanian Foreign Minister Marwan al-Ma'ashir declared that the Iraqi people are the ones who must decide on the future of Iraq and its leaders. However, the Hamas movement and Islamic Jihad said they are hurt because of what is happening in the Iraqi capital, fearing that the Israeli army will commit massacres against the Palestinian people after the fall of Iraq.
The United Nations has made a list of what it wants to do in Iraq after the war. UN Secretary General Kofi Annan said he doesn't mind helping to form an interim government in Iraq to manage the country until a permanent one is established, like what happened in Afghanistan. Bush administration is worried about the political role that the UN can potentially play in Iraq, while France, Russia and Germany are emphasizing the need for the UN to have a major role. Britain stands in the middle. The presidents of the three European nations, France, Germany and Russia, will hold a summit in St. Petersburg this coming Friday, which will be attended by UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. With us from Washington, the journalist and political analyst Muhammad Wahabi. Mr. Muhammad, the Americans are still talking about the possibility of violent fighting in Iraq, even after the fall of Baghdad. What are the implications of such statements?
لا يريدون أن يبالغوا كما بالغوا من قبل على عملية سهولة عملية.
They don't want to exaggerate the easiness of what they call liberating Iraq, as they previously had done in Kuwait. They don't want to exaggerate. They want to minimize expectations because Iraqi resistance is still present in some cities. Thus, they do not want to make it appear as if they have captured Iraq already.
يبدو كأن العراق قد امتلك وأنهم قد امتلكوا العراق بالفعل.
Do you think Washington has already decided on the type of government that will govern Iraq? Do you think it will be directly governed by American administration or indirectly behind closed doors? Or do you think the U.S. will let the Iraqis decide?
في هذه المسألة محسومة بالكامل. يعني هنالك
This matter has already been decided. Currently, there is a secret American administration functioning in Kuwait, whose headquarters are a few homes close to one another. This is headed by an ex-American general, Jay Garner, and his 3 deputies, one in the north, one in the south, and a female deputy in the middle, all of whom are called governors. All the homes in Kuwait are occupied by hundreds, not tens, hundreds of diplomats and professionals from various sectors including agriculture, health, finance, and others. They claim that they will take over the administration of Iraq temporarily until a new government is formed by the Iraqis. However, the length of time is disputed. According to them, they will stay at least 6 months. But Ahmed Chalabi, who has worked with American intelligence agencies since the time of the Shah of Iran, says that they should stay 2 years. While they say 6 months, Ahmed says 2 years.
We were talking about the UN role in Iraq after the war. Do you think the US will allow the UN to have a role that was agreed upon in the Bush-Blair summit? Or do you think that Washington will avoid fulfilling this commitment?
No. In Bush and Blair's summit, the role of the UN remained very ambiguous. They said it will have an active role, but they did not define this active role. If you want my personal opinion, the way I understand it, the active role, according to Washington, contradicts Blair's view. I do not expect Blair's vision to override Bush's position. According to them, there must be an administration that immediately takes control over the Iraqi cities, considering the current chaos taking place in the cities, which will only increase once all of them fall. Thus, in reality, the UN will play a secondary role, not an active role. It will only carry out humanitarian operations through its specialized agencies.
And on the ground in Iraq, sniper fire greeted U.S. Special Forces on Friday as they made their way into the center of the main northern city of Mosul following its capture by Kurdish Peshmerga fighters. More in this report.
11 vehicles carrying dozens of U.S. troops reached Mosul from the north along the Tahuk road, followed by some 300 Kurdistan Democratic Party, the KDP, Peshmergas. Earlier on Friday, U.S. and KDP officials said commanders of the Iraqi Army's 5th Corps based in Mosul had signed a ceasefire accord with the U.S. military, effectively surrendering after a period of negotiations. Mosul, located 450 kilometers north of Baghdad, is an Arab-majority enclave of 1.5 million inhabitants in the mostly Kurdish north and surrounded by oil fields. It is strategically important because of its airport and an Iraqi missile launching base. Like Kirkuk, it had been the target of U.S. air raids since the war in Iraq began on March the 20th. Kurdish fighters who entered the city earlier on Friday were given a subdued reception, unlike Kirkuk, which has deeper Kurdish roots, and exploded in celebration on Thursday at the arrival of Peshmergas from the KDP's rival, the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan. Kurdish forces were seen in only small numbers in Mosul around mid-morning, and though they seemed to be in control, they later disappeared from the center, and only a few were guarding bridges and some roads elsewhere in the city. The U.S. Center Sector Command in Qatar said Mosul and Kirkuk have fallen as coalition forces are inside the cities, adding they are mostly special operations forces. Thousands of residents gathered outside the city hall, and the looting already familiar in other places abandoned by Saddam's regime began. A bank was also looted, with some looters making off with sacks full Iraqi dinar notes, while others played with the money in the streets. In several districts of the city, people were seen taking furniture and anything else they could carry from official buildings, some of which were later seen burning. The fall of Kirkuk and Mosul to the PUK and KDP, who advanced from the autonomous northern Iraqi Kurdistan enclave they jointly rule, alarmed Turkey, which fears Kurdish control of the oil-rich region would fan desires for independence that would spread to its own restive Kurdish minority.
International aid agencies issued urgent appeals for US-led forces to get to grips with law and order in Iraq on Friday, as widespread looting and chaos ripped apart Baghdad hospitals and stopped much-needed aid reaching most of the country. The International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, issued an urgent appeal to the United States and Britain to meet their obligation to protect hospitals and water supplies after the fall of Iraqi President Saddam Hussein's regime. In a statement, the Geneva-based organization urgently appealed to the coalition forces and all other persons in authority to do everything possible to protect essential infrastructure such as hospitals and water supply and evacuation systems from looting and destruction. Also on Friday, the UN Refugee Agency warned that the collapse of law and order in Iraq could still lead to a refugee exodus from the country after 30,000 people fled the cities of Baghdad and Nasiriyah earlier this week. Other UN agencies, which started stocking emergency supplies and building up staff in neighboring countries before the US-led invasion began, said they were still holding back a massive aid operation inside Iraq.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support provided by Henry and Virgilia Dakin.